We immediately returned to the Jena warehouse downstairs. First, we found several Kwantung army uniforms and jackets to put on, wiped the blood and mud from our faces, and each found a steel helmet to wear. Azi was already pretty. Wearing the military uniform made her look even more beautiful. Fatty Zan stood beside her, exclaiming, "Oh my, you look exactly like Yoshiko Kawashima in that Japanese uniform." Azi didn't know who Yoshiko Kawashima was. Thinking Fatty Zan was complimenting her, she even looked smug. I told Azi, "He said you look like a Japanese female spy." Upon hearing this, Azi's delicate eyebrows shot up. Fatty Zan quickly said, "Oh, I misspoke. What I meant was, Azi in military attire with a gun in hand reminds me of a poem by Chairman Mao. In a heroic pose, she holds her 5-foot rifle. The new sun lightly shines upon the training ground." Chinese daughters are intelligent and capable. They only favor military uniforms, not powders and perfumes. I stood there, chuckling. This fat guy is almost a poet. He keeps spouting a few lines every chance he gets. While talking, I found a hexagonal wrench on a shelf with oil drums. Everything's here, we've got what we needed. Let's make the most of our time and act. The three of us, dressed in Kwantung army uniforms and carrying submachine guns, returned to the original spot. I was still at the very back. This time, neither Fatty Zan nor Azi claimed to have seen the shadow of a child. I didn't ask, but I couldn't help but feel a little superstitious and paranoid in my heart. I thought to myself, Fatty Zan said that child ran into the iron door. What does that little imp really want? Is it trying to guide us out? Could such a good thing exist? Or does it have some other scheme? Damn it, I just happen to still have some glutinous rice. I heard ghosts are afraid of glutinous rice. If that little demon dares to cause trouble, I'll definitely teach it a lesson. Otherwise, it wouldn't showcase Hu Bayi's methods. As I followed them and cheered myself up, the wound on my back hardly hurt anymore. Before long, we were back at the rock cave with the iron door. To be safe, we all wore steel helmets and gas masks, cocked our guns, and loaded the bullets. Before opening the door, I told Azi to scoop up a handful of glutinous rice, ready to throw it. At the same time, I told Fatty Zan to aim his gun. If there was anything inside the door, no matter what, just kill it first and deal with the rest later. I also told Fatty Zan to coordinate with me, firing in turns, so reloading time would not be empty. After everything was arranged, I slung my gun over my shoulder, placed the hexagonal wrench on the bolt on the door, and twisted with all my might. This door hadn't been opened in decades, and the bolts were rusted tight. I exerted all my strength, and the wrench almost broke in my hand. Finally, I heard a clack, clack, clack. The 3 ventilation shafts below hissed whoosh, and air rushed inside. The iron door itself began to creak and groan. With the ventilation shafts cleared, the heavy iron door slowly rumbled open. I quickly stepped back 2 paces, raised my gun and flashlight aiming at the door, but inside it was silent as death, without a single sound or movement. The situation was unexpected. All we saw was complete darkness inside, making nothing clear. The flashlight's beam was swallowed by the darkness within. I gestured to Azi. Understanding my intention, Azi, like a fairy scattering flowers, threw the handful of glutinous rice inside. But the sealed room remained motionless. It seemed as if all sounds in the world had disappeared. All I could hear was my own ragged breathing within the gas mask. It seemed we had been worrying too much. Indeed, we were simply scaring ourselves half to death with groundless fears. Finally, Fatty Zan couldn't be more patient. He went ahead alone, stepping into the sealed room. Azi and I followed closely behind, in single file. This sealed room was about 40 square meters in area, just one single chamber. Besides that iron door, there was no other exit. Inside this chamber, there were neither biological weapons nor chemical weapons. Before entering, I had seemingly considered every possibility, but one thing I hadn't expected was that there were more than 10 large coffins in the room. The coffins were scattered throughout the room. The wood of some coffins, after many years, had already rotted. Their styles and craftsmanship were all different. There was even an extremely large stone sarcophagus. The most luxurious among them were 2 coffins made of cho wood inlaid with gold threads. On the ground, countless ceramic shards were scattered. I turned to look at Fatty Zahn and Azi. Both shook their heads. Although they wore gas masks, I could still sense their bewilderment. Fatty Zahn asked me, "Yi, what's going on?" "Damn it, it looks like a museum. Where did all these coffins come from?" I thought for a moment. Actually, this wasn't hard to guess. It was just that we had preconceived notions and hadn't expected these things. Yaran Valley was originally an ancient tomb complex from the Jin Liao period. The Kwantung army built this secret underground base, especially the 3 tunnels connecting the 2 ends of the base, cutting across Yaran Valley. During construction, they must have unearthed quite a few ancient tombs, burial objects, and even the sarcophagi of Jin Liao aristocrats from these tombs. To the Japanese, these were treasures. They took everything they excavated from the ancient tombs and hid them in this semi-vacuum room. The Kwantung army withdrew too hastily, only having time to take the valuable burial goods with them before leaving all the coffins behind. Fatty Zahn said, "The Japanese really knew how to conveniently grab things, leaving nothing for us. Let's see if there's anything valuable left in the coffins. It'll at least make all our effort worthwhile." Saying this, he kicked open the lid of a large coffin. The coffin lid had already been pried open by the Japanese and hadn't been nailed shut, so with a kick it flew to one side. Azi didn't dare to look closer. "I'll wait for you two at the door. I'll also keep watch, just in case someone locks us in here. That would be terrible." As Azi finished speaking, she went to the door, 1 foot outside, 1 foot inside, guarding the entrance. I turned to Azi, who was guarding the door, and said, "You're still vigilant, little sister." I completely forgot about that. All those years in the army, what a waste of thought. This door can only be opened from the outside. If we get locked in here, we'd cry and not even find a way to shed our tears. Fatty Zahn just rummaged furiously inside the coffins. Damn it, nothing but bones. These Japanese are truly despicable. Do they implement the 3 alls policy, kill all, burn all, destroy all, wherever they go? They didn't even leave a single intact, decent jar. Rummaging through the next 3 or 4 coffins yielded the same result. Fatty Zahn cursed furiously, then went to push open the lid of the red, painted cho wood coffin inlaid with gold. I didn't pay much attention to those ordinary coffins. My eyes were drawn to the imposing stone sarcophagus. My intuition told me there was something inside. I don't know why I had that thought, but I suddenly felt agitated and compelled to open this stone sarcophagus. I called Fatty Zahn to help. The 2 of us together pushed the stone slab on top. The slab was unusually thick and heavy. Even with great effort, we only managed to open a small crack. Fatty Zahn gasped for breath, waving his hand. "Too tired. Let's rest a bit." "How heavy is this thing, good heavens? My stomach's completely empty, I can't push it." I was also famished, my stomach rumbling. As soon as I exerted myself, my vision blurred, so I had to sit down and rest. We took off our gas masks and each lit a cigarette. Fatty Zahn exhaled a smoke ring. "Yi, tell me, were people in ancient times crazy to make stone coffins? This is the first time I've seen someone use stone for a coffin." I touched the stone slab and said, "This isn't a coffin. It's called a stone sarcophagus." "A coffin. Sarcophagus, a coffin. Sarcophagus. The wooden coffin is placed inside this stone sarcophagus. To receive such treatment, he must have been a big shot, perhaps even a prince." Fatty Zahn scratched his head. "Ah, so that's it. Damn, it's complicated. All buried in Yaran Valley. So comparing the general in the tomb we dug up with the owner of this stone sarcophagus, whose official rank was higher?" I shook my head. "Can't tell. This is a difficult question. None of us are very knowledgeable about history. However, during the several hundred years of the Jin Liao Yuan period, the northern nomadic people were unprecedentedly powerful. They conquered the world on horseback. I guess they valued martial arts over literature, so the aristocrats with the greatest military achievements were buried in the central tomb of this beautiful Feng Shui spot. The tombs of aristocrats buried nearby might even have more burial objects than the general's tomb. The preferences of the owners during their lifetime differed, so their burial objects would certainly not be the same. Take the ancient tomb we dug up as an example. The owner was a martial man without any refined hobbies, so the items in his tomb were all horses and weapons. Fatty Zahn said, "Actually, those horses must have been legendary steeds. If they were alive, they'd be worth a lot of money. But now there's just a pile of bones, and no one would even want them for scrap." Luckily, he still had 2 pieces of jade. Otherwise, our efforts would have been in vain. If we take these 2 pieces of jade back and have Goldtooth find a buyer, we'll surely get 8 to 10,000. While talking, our cigarettes were finished. The 2 of us put our gas masks back on and exerted all our strength to push the stone slab again. Aziz also ran over to help, and finally, we managed to push the stone slab to one side. Inside the stone sarcophagus, a pitch black wooden coffin was revealed. This coffin was almost twice as large as a normal coffin, and its height was about half a person's stature. The craftsmanship of the coffin was exquisite, definitely not an ordinary item. Both ends, all 4 sides, and even the coffin lid had 5 color gold plated paintings depicting various auspicious mythical beasts like celestial cranes, qilin, and turtle-headed snakes, to bless the owner so their body would transform into an immortal after death. On the coffin lid, a map of the 28 constellations was painted, and the 4 sides at the base of the coffin were carved with golden cloud patterns. It was unclear what secret method was used, but after thousands of years, the colors were still as fresh as new, truly astounding. This was the first time we had seen such a magnificent and stylish coffin. If we hadn't seen it with our own eyes, how could we have imagined such an enormous and beautiful coffin, a true work of art, existed in the world? Fatty Zahn was delighted. "Even if there's nothing inside, if we haul this coffin back and sell it, we'll surely make a fortune." Saying this, he rolled up his sleeves and pushed the coffin lid open. Even Aziz couldn't resist the urge to see what was inside this large coffin. The 3 of us huddled together, shining our flashlights inside. The brocade lining below had long rotted away. It would probably turn to dust at a touch. On the decayed brocade lay a skeleton. After 1,000 years, the clothes and flesh had long since vanished. Only the skull remained relatively intact, its mouth wide open, revealing 2 rotten black teeth. Without the skull, it would have been hard to recognize this as a human skeleton. Aziz swept the flashlight beam into the corner of the enormous coffin and suddenly screamed in horror, "Oh my God, it's that child!" At both ends of the coffin, there was a child with exposed buttocks, 1 boy and 1 girl appearing to be about 5 or 6 years old, with lifelike faces. The boy's hair was tied in a top-knot braid, and the girl's hair was styled into 2 braids. These were definitely not modern hairstyles, but rather resembled ancient people from murals. Could they be child sacrifices? The owner's body was almost gone, yet how were these 2 children preserved so perfectly? These 2 brats 9 times out 10 are fakes, made to look so real. Fatty Zahn said, reaching out to pinch the child in the coffin. "Old Fatty here wants to see today if you've become some kind of spirit yet?" I grabbed Fatty Zahn's hand. "Absolutely do not touch them without gloves. These aren't fake people. There's probably poison. Everyone, look closely at these 2 children. They're covered in purplish blue spots, those are mercury spots. Back in the 1950s, my grandfather Hu Bayi had a medical examination at a large hospital in Beijing. During that time, by coincidence, there was a major construction project near the hospital. An ancient tomb was unearthed at the construction site, and my grandfather had sneaked out of the hospital to see the excitement, even going into the underground tomb for a look. That tomb was said to belong to a Ming dynasty prince. Around the tomb was a ring of black water. The underground tomb was divided into 3 sections, front, middle, and back. The entrance had 1,000 jinn trap hanging. Passing through this entrance, the first was the Ming Hall, arranged like the tomb owner's home when alive, furnished with various household items. These items were called Ming artifacts. Going deeper inside, the middle tomb chamber was called the burial chamber, where the coffin and sarcophagus were placed. This was a joint burial tomb, and what was special was that the coffins of the tomb owner and his wife, the prince and princess, were both suspended in the middle of the burial chamber, hooked with iron chains, bronze rings, and bronze locks. Finally, there was the sacrificial chamber, where the burial goods were placed. A few days later, another ancient tomb from the Yuan dynasty was unearthed in the Haidian district. Both of these tombs had child sacrifices. When unearthed, they still looked exactly like living people. However, the clothes on the child sacrifices in the Yuan dynasty tomb turned to dust at a touch. Later, my grandfather recounted these two incidents to me as stories. He said that these child sacrifices, when alive, besides being forced to drink mercury, also had holes dug in the top of their heads, backs, and soles of their feet, which were filled with mercury. After death, mercury powder was applied evenly all over their bodies, like making specimens. After thousands of years, their flesh would not rot. This technique was far more advanced than ancient Egyptian mummification, but the contexts of the two civilizations were different, and their values also varied greatly. Furthermore, the mercury pouring method to preserve the appearance of the corpse required living people. In the dead, blood no longer circulated, so it couldn't be poured in. Therefore, this technique was never used on the bodies of any tomb owners. The most cruel thing in the world is probably child sacrifice. Fatty Zahn, wearing gloves, lifted one of the children's bodies out and inspected it thoroughly. Indeed, holes were found on places like the top of the head, back, and soles of the feet. These holes in the bodies had all been carefully sealed by skilled craftsmen. On the bodies, numerous purplish, black spots appeared. A layer of mercury powder was often applied to the body and to accompanying gold, silver, and jewelry. Over a long period, chemical reactions would occur. For more recent periods, it would turn reddish, brown. For older periods, it would turn purplish, black. These mottled spots are often called mercury spots or mercury treatment. Some places also call spots on corpses yin rot or blue mercury. Fatty Zahn was clearly a bit tense. He tried to act calm, exhaling and saying, "I once read a novel by Lu Xun that described mercury treatment on antiques. It seems this old guy wasn't making things up, it really did happen." Ozzy asked, "That's so pathetic. Brother Yi, why weren't these two children wearing clothes? I remember seeing the child flash by earlier wearing clothes. Could it be a ghost?" I replied, "Whether they're ghosts or not, only they themselves know. It's just that these two children aren't naked." Child sacrifices were certainly dressed in bright, colorful clothes. After nearly 1,000 years, those clothes would have rotted away by now. This coffin is probably from the Yuan dynasty. From the moment the Kwantung army dug up this coffin, the clothes, upon contact with air, would have disintegrated into dust. Ozzy continued, "Don't they always say, 'May the dead rest in peace'? Should we help them then? They're so pitiful." Fatty Zahn nodded in agreement. "I just want to get rich. I don't want to get involved in any messy business. But this time, it's a special situation. We'll do a good deed. Let's take them out, dig a grave, and bury them properly. Don't leave them naked and exposed here anymore. They've guarded the tomb owner for 1,000 years. It's time for them to rest." The corpses were full of mercury and wouldn't dissolve even if burned. The only way was to dig a pit and bury them. This was all we could do. We hoped that such tragedies would lessen in the world. Without further delay, Fatty Zahn and I took off our Kwantung army jackets and wrapped the two children in them one by one, tying them securely to our backs. The mercury-filled bodies were incredibly heavy. Fortunately, they were children. If they were adults, carrying one person would surely break our backs. Fatty Zahn was somewhat resentful that he hadn't found anything valuable. He wanted to set fire to all these coffins. Ozzy and I quickly restrained him, and he finally relented. We returned to the rock cave to discuss how to escape. By this time, everyone was uncomfortably hungry and thirsty. We only regretted that there was no food or drink, no explosives or mines in this underground base. To get back to the surface, we had no choice but to go through the general's tomb. But thinking of the red-haired monster's strength truly gave us a headache. Even well-fed and hydrated, we might not be its match, let alone now, so hungry our limbs were weak. The three of us looked at each other, almost sharing the same thought. There were more than 10 dead bats on the ground. At this point, we could only offer these guys to our stomachs. Humans are naturally omnivores. Once they're starving and their vision blurs, there's nothing they can't eat. Azi recalled that when she was little, she and her grandfather had eaten bat meat in a deep cave in the forest. That year, there was a forest fire and a famine. Large animals in the mountains had all disappeared. People had to eat field mice, bat meat, crickets, and grasshoppers. Bat tendons and cartilage were very tasty and satisfying to chew. The pig-faced bats in the cave had small, jagged bones and looked fierce and evil, just like dried vampire corpses. Regarding the statement that their meat was tasty, Fatty Zahn and I maintained a reserved judgment attitude. But for survival, we couldn't think too much. If we wanted to roast them, we had to go back to the Jenna warehouse, where there were many wooden crates that could be used as firewood. Of course, coffin boards could also be burned, but eating roasted meat cooked over coffin wood was something that was, to some extent, hard to accept. So Fatty Zahn used a rope he had, selected 5 or 6 plump bats, tied their feet together in a string and dragged them along. Among them was the largest bat king. Back at the Jenna warehouse, we set the 2 jackets wrapped around the child sacrifices aside. Azi used a dagger to cut off the bats' ugly heads and their fleshless claws, then gutted them, finally skinning them cursorily. I found a pile of wooden crates, stomped them open into planks, then used a knife to scrape off some wood shavings. I lit the wood shavings with a match to start a fire. Fatty Zahn helped by squatting beside me, blowing air into the flames with his mouth to make them blaze. We then found some bayonets attached to rifles, skewered the bats, and placed them over the fire to roast. Fatty Zahn frowned, appearing very reluctant to eat this dish. Azi encouraged him, "It's not bad to eat. Don't think of it as bat meat. Chew a few more times, it tastes just like mutton." I didn't mind much. Aren't bats just like rats? When I was in the army participating in exercises in Shaanxi, I had eaten rat meat countless times. All kinds, from field rats, flying rats, moles, voles, to flower rats. The taste was acceptable, lean and fatty in layers, truly no different from mutton. However, I had never eaten bat meat before. Pig-faced bats are warm-blooded animals and don't have much fat, so they shouldn't be roasted for too long. When the meat looked cooked, I tried a piece first. The shoulder meat was very crispy, with quite a lot of tendons and cartilage inside. It was definitely not as delicious as mutton, but it was indeed very satisfying to chew. Seeing me eat, Fatty Zahn also held his nose and ate a piece. Finding it tolerable, he immediately devoured an entire bat like a whirlwind, still craving more. He then skewered the largest bat king onto a bayonet and started roasting it. When we had eaten about half a bat, a string of sticky, glistening liquid dripped from the ceiling directly onto Fatty Zahn's face. Fatty Zahn was eagerly eating when he felt the wetness on his face. He immediately wiped it with his hand and exclaimed in surprise, "Damn it, whose saliva is this much? It's dripping all over my face." As soon as the words left his mouth, he himself felt that this question sounded a bit off.